7 p.m., August 21st, 1955, in the rural area of Christian County, Kentucky, USA. The Langford family of 11 members was gathered around the dinner table, preparing for an evening like any other. None of them knew that just a few minutes later, a series of absurd events would unfold, leading to a long confrontation lasting several hours with entities that science still cannot explain to this day. That evening was hot, and nothing seemed unusual. Billy Ray Taylor, 21 years old, went out to the well to fetch water. When he looked toward the southwestern horizon, he saw an object silently gliding across the sky. Its shape resembled a metal washtub, egg-shaped, glowing brightly, with interwoven colors like a rainbow. Within seconds, the object stopped in midair, then slowly descended behind a line of trees, where there was a ravine about 12 meters deep. At that time, stories about flying saucers and extraterrestrial beings were flooding the newspapers. So Billy believed he had just witnessed something not from Earth. He hurried back inside to tell everyone, but they laughed, thinking it was just his imagination. Until 45 minutes later, when the twilight faded completely, and the sound of the dog barking furiously erupted outside. Billy and Elmer, 25 years old, stepped out onto the back porch to check. Their dog was terrified, crawling under the house to hide. Right after that, both of them noticed a strange light moving slowly among the distant trees. As the light came closer, its shape became clear. A humanoid creature, glowing, no taller than 1.2 meters. Its head was round and disproportionately large, with almost no neck connecting to the body. The eyes were big, yellow, and set far apart, giving an unbalanced appearance. Two long arms nearly touched the ground, with fingers ending in curved claws like metal hooks. On its head were large, soft ears, drooping down on both sides. Some people described it as having a small cone-shaped nose, but others said they saw nothing at all, since the creature's glowing eyes made it impossible to focus on other details. Its upper body looked strong, while the legs appeared stiff, moving slowly, as if wading through a thick substance. Many believed its feet were shaped like suction cups, and its entire body was either metallic or covered in a silvery outfit that reflected the moonlight. Mrs. Langford later said the creature looked like a metal bucket with a head on top and small legs underneath. The outer shell was shiny, like the surface of a refrigerator in the kitchen. Even when investigators later drew its appearance, she said the sketch was so accurate that she never wanted to look at it again. Other witnesses also confirmed the remarkable similarity, though some details differed, which later led to various inconsistent illustrations. As the creature approached the house, the feeling of threat made the men immediately grab their guns. They fired, but strangely, the creature only flipped backward, then stood up and ran into the darkness. No blood, no wound. At that moment, they realized that although its body seemed weak and stiff, its arms were agile enough to move faster than they could comprehend. According to Mrs. Langford, at first the women thought it was just a prank, until one of them saw it with her own eyes. From that moment on, no one in the house laughed anymore. The 3 children were hidden carefully under the bed. The men went back inside, barricading the doors and waiting in tense silence. Suddenly, the bizarre face of the strange creature appeared right outside the living room window. The men inside immediately fired through the screen, but the creature flipped and dodged the bullets in ways no human could imagine, then vanished into the darkness. After a few minutes of calming down, Billy opened the door to check. He was looking around when suddenly a hand from the roof grabbed his hair and pulled hard. Fortunately, someone nearby managed to pull him back inside before things got out of control. Elmer rushed out, aimed his gun at the roof, and pulled the trigger. The bullet hit the target, and the creature rolled off the roof onto the ground. Witnesses said the sound of the bullet striking its body was like tapping on a tin can or metal object. However, the encounter was not over yet. Billy shouted that another one was clinging to a nearby tree. He and Elmer fired, causing the creature to fall. But suddenly, it landed lightly, as if floating in midair. They continued shooting, but the strange being escaped again, leaving no trace of injury. At the same time, another entity moved around the side of the house, approaching with its arms raised high, exactly the same posture they had seen before. Later, Mrs. Langford believed that gesture might have been a form of communication. Elmer didn't hesitate and pulled the trigger once more, but just like before, the creature flipped and fled. According to witness accounts, the skin or outer armor of the creatures emitted a faint glow, possibly from the moonlight reflecting on their metallic surface. However, that luminescent layer shone even brighter whenever the creature was hit by a bullet or heard a scream. Later, some newspapers speculated there were 12 to 15 individuals, but the original investigation report recorded only a few moving extremely fast. Realizing that chasing them was useless, the Langford family went back inside, locking the doors and barricading themselves. They turned on the lights on the front porch and in the backyard. When they switched on the lights in both areas, the beams illuminated the garden. At that moment, the family noticed something strange. The creatures always avoided the light. They only moved around the dark edges of the yard. From time to time, a small figure would peek through the window, but only for an instant before retreating into the darkness. Remarkably, during all those hours of observation, the creatures never tried to enter the house. The entire incident lasted about 3 to 4 hours. Some witnesses said the creature grabbed Billy's hair around 8 or 9 p.m., while Mrs. Langford clearly remembered that moment happening closer to 10:30 p.m. No one knew exactly how many shots were fired, only that by the end, the two men had emptied all their ammunition boxes. Around 11 p.m., the family decided to leave the house by car to seek help. When they arrived at the police station, they were nearly hysterical, immediately talking over one another about being attacked by strange beings around their home. At first, the officers were skeptical, but within minutes, they realized this was no fabricated story. All the witnesses were drenched in sweat, voices trembling, and showed clear signs of genuine fear. A police officer with medical training examined them and recorded that Billy Ray Taylor's heart rate was 140, nearly twice the normal level. Although the story sounded unbelievable, if the testimonies were true, the idea that a group of unknown creatures surrounded a house for hours, endured dozens of gunshots without injury, was something that could not be dismissed lightly. For that reason, that very night, authorities mobilized 16 local police officers and 4 military police to the scene. On their way there, one officer reported seeing 2 glowing objects like meteors flying across the sky, emitting sounds like cannon fire, and notably, they were moving in the opposite direction of the Langford house. The authorities searched the area until nearly 2 a.m. The atmosphere at the farmhouse was tense and heavy. Police moved cautiously, shining flashlights around the yard, while the Langford family huddled together outside, refusing to re-enter the house until every corner had been thoroughly checked. In the field behind the house, where the creature was said to have been shot, officers found a patch of glowing grass about 40 centimeters in diameter. Upon closer inspection, it didn't differ much from the surrounding area, except that the reflection was stronger when viewed from certain angles. Others in the investigation team also claimed to have seen a faint blue glow among the trees. Police confirmed that there were many spent bullet casings around the house. The window frames were badly damaged. But aside from those details, there was no trace of the creature's presence. At about 2:15 a.m., the authorities left the scene, promising to return the next morning. However, only an hour and a half later, around 3:30 a.m., the creatures appeared again. According to Mrs. Langford's account, she saw one of them standing right outside the window, its eyes glowing brightly, claws pressed against the glass. She immediately called everyone to wake up. Elmer grabbed his gun and fired toward the target. But as before, nothing happened. The creatures vanished, then reappeared again. The last time they were seen was around 4:45 to 5:15 a.m. The next morning, officers returned to the scene to continue their investigation. One even climbed onto the roof, searching for footprints, but no traces were found. All they had in hand were the astonishingly consistent testimonies of the witnesses. No photographs, no samples, no other physical evidence. Yet the story quickly spread throughout the United States. Newspapers began to embellish and add details, and many local outlets called it the attack of the Little Green Men, a phrase that originated in Evansville, Indiana. This event inadvertently gave birth to the term Little Green Men in popular culture. Within days, thousands of curious people flocked to the Langford home, hoping to see with their own eyes the place where aliens appeared. The overwhelming attention exhausted the Langford family. They gradually avoided the media and refused interviews. Eventually, to control the crowd, they had to charge an entrance fee to anyone who wanted to enter the area. But this very act led to accusations that they had fabricated the story for profit. Over time, everything gradually quieted down. Those creatures never appeared again. And to this day, no one truly knows what happened that night. No physical evidence, no clear traces of presence. Almost all that remains are the testimonies of the group of witnesses. The initial investigation lacked procedure and system, which may have caused important evidence to be missed. And after 7 decades, every question still remains unanswered. Therefore, we are forced to rely on the testimonies of those who witnessed the event. The Langford family belonged to the working class in rural Kentucky and Pennsylvania. This information appeared frequently in many records, but was used with two opposing interpretations. Some considered it proof that they were simple, gullible, and superstitious. Many researchers, however, held a different opinion. They believed that the Langfords' humble background and rural lifestyle were evidence of honest and lack of motive for deception. Such people would hardly be capable of fabricating such a complex story merely to attract attention. If we set aside prejudice and look solely at the data, existing records lean toward the possibility that the witnesses genuinely believed in what they saw. There was no sign that they intentionally created a hoax. Government officials who had direct contact with the group reached the same conclusion. All were honest, consistent, and showed no signs of deceit. Researcher Robert Lewick noted that 7 out of the 11 witnesses gave almost identical statements. He argued that such consistency would be very difficult to achieve without prior coordination. However, one noteworthy detail stood out. 3 of the men among those 7 had left the scene early in the morning and only returned after the incident was over. The only discrepancy in all the testimonies lay in Billy's description of the creature's nose. Overall, the argument against the fabrication theory remained strong, as the family had no motive or benefit to create such a hoax. Immediately after the incident, they voluntarily reported to the police and appeared exhausted from being pursued excessively by public attention. The later decision to charge visitors was merely a reluctant measure to control the crowds, not an act of profiteering. Some researchers questioned whether alcohol might have affected their perception. However, police thoroughly checked and found no signs of intoxication or substance use. Mrs. Langford also affirmed that her family strictly forbade any alcoholic beverages. So, then let's return to the starting point. What exactly did Billy Ray Taylor see in the dark sky that night? He described the object as resembling a bathtub or an egg, soaring upward and leaving behind a brilliant multicolored trail like a rainbow. The most reasonable hypothesis was that it was a meteor, especially since a police officer on his way to the scene had also seen 2 similar luminous objects. Even many local residents confirmed observing a meteor shower around the same time. However, what happened afterward could not be explained so simply. So, what exactly were the beings the witnesses described? Could they truly have been traces of an extraterrestrial civilization? According to the testimonies, the creatures stood only 75 centimeters to 0.2 meters tall, with disproportionately large heads resembling the familiar image of the Greys often mentioned in UFO literature. Their eyes glowed, their movements were unnatural. Their arms were long, nearly touching the ground. Their legs stiff yet fast-moving, completely unlike any vertebrate animal on Earth. Another detail that drew researchers' attention. When shot, the sound was like bullets striking metal. This led to the hypothesis that they possessed an outer shell or structure similar to an alloy, or perhaps wore a kind of biological armor unknown to humankind. Moreover, no earthly animal could endure such close-range gunfire without showing traces of injury or damage. Their acrobatic movements, dodging bullets faster than normal human reflexes, made many observers believe they possessed reactions far beyond those of organic life. Throughout the encounter, the creatures appeared multiple times, repeatedly approaching but never attacking. They merely observed, reacted when threatened, then retreated, a behavior considered characteristic of intelligent beings capable of controlling instinct. Even the act of raising both arms when approaching humans was thought to be a nonverbal form of communication, possibly peaceful. In many other UFO reports around the world, this gesture often appears as a silent signaling method. Witnesses also affirmed that the creatures' bodies emitted a metallic glow, even without direct moonlight shining on them. If that was not reflection, then it might have been a self-luminous mechanism, like a lightly charged surface or an energy-stabilizing outer shell. Unlike wild animals that fear bright light, these beings moved in an orderly manner, as if following a programmed pattern of observation. Some researchers still argue that the Kelly-Hopkinsville incident cannot be considered convincing evidence. They question the accuracy of the witnesses' accounts. But when compared to hundreds of other UFO reports, the event in Kentucky stands out for its large number of witnesses, consistent testimonies, and absence of deceit. For decades afterward, the Langford family maintained their story. Even as the original participants gradually passed away, the account continued to be passed down to their descendants with almost no changes in detail. Nevertheless, the scientific community remains skeptical. Skeptical researchers such as Brian Dunning and Joe Nickel have suggested that what the Langford family saw were actually great horned owls, a species common throughout North America. Indeed, there are some striking similarities: long ears, large yellow eyes, sharp claws, and faces that are hard to distinguish in the dark. They theorized that the witnesses had seen owls gliding or landing on the roof, which could explain the description of a creature floating and then landing softly. The light the witnesses described might have been moonlight reflecting off the owl's eyes. And the posture of raising their hands might simply have been the owl spreading its wings in defense, or a visual illusion caused by viewing from a distance. This theory sounds plausible in some aspects, but there are still many gaps. First, owls do not glow in the dark, and they are exceptionally good at camouflage. Second, the Langford family were farmers living near the woods. It is hard to believe that all of them could mistake an owl throughout a 4 or 5 hour confrontation. Furthermore, the incident occurred around 8 p.m. in August, when there was still twilight and the porch lights were on. Under such conditions, the chance of misidentification was very low. Other theories were also proposed: weasel, raccoon, bear cub, or even exotic animals like chimpanzees. However, in 1957, the United States Air Force, the agency that investigated the case, presented another conclusion: that the creatures were monkeys painted silver, escaped from a traveling circus that had recently passed through the area. Yet, no evidence was ever found to support this theory. Another line of explanation suggested that the creatures could have been experimental flying devices from the nearby Fort Campbell military base. Perhaps they were testing new technology or conducting a nighttime exercise. However, this hypothesis was quickly dismissed. The witnesses argued that if it truly were the military, they would have kept it secret, not carried out such a bizarre attack on a civilian farmhouse in the middle of the night. And while it might be possible to explain the aerial phenomenon, none of the theories could explain the most crucial part, the prolonged gunfight between humans and unknown entities. Clearly, there was no reasonable motive for the U.S. military to disguise themselves, approach, and engage in a shootout with a rural farmhouse. Nor was there any evidence that they were testing related technologies. To this day, no analysis has been able to provide a satisfying explanation. The incident remains at the boundary between personal memory and unverifiable phenomenon. And for that reason, the Kelly-Hopkinsville Encounter has become one of the most famous UFO mysteries in U.S. history. In the end, the only thing that can be said with certainty is this: no one knows what truly happened on the night of August 21st, 1955, at Mrs. Glennie Langford's farmhouse, and perhaps the truth will forever remain beyond the reach of modern science. If you found this story thought-provoking, please leave a like so the algorithm knows you enjoy historical mysteries like this. Don't forget to share the video with friends who love UFOs and unexplained phenomena. And if this is your first time on the channel, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, because in upcoming episodes, we'll explore other strange encounters that once made the whole world ask, are we truly alone in this universe?